Hello, everyone. I'm Trent Russell. I'm the founder of Green Skies Analytics. We're the go-to place for all things analytics and internal audit. That is primarily my background. It's actually my entire background is audit, either external audit or internal audit. And I'm talking about data literacy today. Data literacy, it does sound super boring to hear somebody say data literacy. I can understand if people just almost immediately fall asleep. So we're going to hit on why it is important to be data literate. I think if we drew an analogy of literacy in general in terms of being able to read and understand the importance of that, we can think about that similarly in our organizations and the importance of data. I don't think it's any surprise, the importance of data, especially within an organization, and we'll hit on that a little bit. Again, though, my perspective is coming from internal audit, although a lot of these ideas and principles can be applied regardless of your profession or your industry. There's a decent amount of slides. I know Alex is a big fan of demos. We definitely have 2 demos, but just based on the topic, most of this is a bit slide heavy, certainly more slide heavy than I'm used to. So the boring definition slide, kind of the obligatory definition side, data literacy is the ability to read, understand, create, and communicate data as information. Another way to kind of look at this is, and almost the importance of data literacy. Do you think there's any executive out there that would say, you know what, we don't care about reading, understanding, creating, or communicating data to make decisions? That person doesn't exist, and if they do, they should probably seek employment elsewhere. The internal audit definition that I've come up with is the ability to read, understand, create, and communicate data to influence, to become a trusted advisor, or to create positive change. Creating positive change is directly from the IAA standards. Become a trusted advisor has become almost this kind of mantra or goal for internal audit. Over the past, I don't know, 5-10 years, we want to be the trusted advisor. We want folks to come to us and go, we have this problem, or we have this new initiative, and we understand the value of internal audit. So we want you guys to be included on that, as well as influence. A lot of times in audit, we find issues and effectively have to sell the importance of those issues, the risks associated with that, and not fixing those, what we'll broadly call, I guess, issues. So we have to influence in order for that to happen. I really think about data literacy more as a change management project. And if you are on the audit side, especially within SOX, as we call it here in the States, financial statement audits, basically. It's really a change management initiative. And so, like I was saying, if you're in IT SOX work, change management, you would refer to it or think of it as a change to an application or a system at your organization in terms of what's the change authorized, tested, and approved before it goes into production. That's not the type of change I'm talking about, or the change management I'm talking about. I'm talking about culture type change. So probably if you search for change management, those are the topics that'll come up as opposed to the SOX type stuff. But it's really a change management initiative. There is a culture change, especially if you want it throughout the organization. And so within, if you kind of boiled down the 2 questions, at least in terms of if we're going to implement some kind of change management program, or if we're going to introduce some kind of, we're trying to change the culture, 2 things that it boils down to is why is it important and how does it impact you, the individual? The importance of data literacy, again, I think it goes back to data's everywhere. It's similar to how, again, we need to be literate in terms of just being able to literally read. And so if we apply that to data literacy, we need to be able to understand the data to some degree. And there's various levels of data literacy. But, for the most part, when I work with internal auditors on developing data literacy programs, the objective, especially if there's a if there's a data team within the audit group, is everybody outside the team should be able to know enough, or should be data literate, as another way to put it, to be able to go to the data team and go, I've got this audit coming up. I want you to do this, 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 and this. Like, can you pull this data? Can you run this analysis, et cetera? That would be fantastic if everyone could get to that level. So that's I think the obvious importance. We've heard data is the new oil, et cetera. And so it's not going away. Another way to think about it is, because it is a pretty decent change, like I wasn't really around for this. I was a little too young, but if you think about when everything moved to the internet, like whatever your job was, like it moved to the internet or it got digitized in some way. If you stop using a red pencil to mark things, notes or issues in work papers, again, this is coming from the audit perspective, and move to, hey, everything's digitized now. It's going to be in Microsoft Word or Excel or even PowerPoint. Like that kind of change. I'm sure there were a lot of people that are like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. I don't like it. It's new. It's not fun. It makes my brain hurt. I get to a point and I just don't want to do it. But we're forced to get there. And I think we're going to have to force people, unfortunately, to get there with data literacy. How it impacts you, it could positively impact you in a lot of ways. If you are, depending, I guess, on the level of data literacy that you're at, promotions would be easier, I would say, because if you can go to, especially if you have a data team that you can go to and go, I need this, 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 and this, can you build it for me? Then being that person that's able to get insights from that and drive change as a result of leveraging a data team is obviously going to be a big boost for you, which also would entail some level, you would assume, increased compensation. To me, it's just also fun, a lot more fun. If you are kind of stuck in the day-to-day or you feel like your job is mundane, then being able to, especially if you can work with the data, is going to make it a lot more interesting. And there is, I mean, just endless amounts of things that you can do to kind of keep you busy, as one way to put it, but interested is probably a better way to put it. And just the value that you can add is fantastic. I've read, I don't know how many books on data literacy. Oh, let me go back. How to be data literate, data literacy principles, etc. And mostly it's just definitions. There's really nothing that's like, hey, you should try this, and this within your data literacy program. So I do want to share some practical advice from what I've experienced personally, and then as well as what in talking to other teams, they've said, hey, we tried this, it sucked, it didn't work. We tried this though, and it did work. And so one of the bigger things is a mindset change when it comes to data. Me being in data constantly, I know I will look at, if I'm walking through a store, I might think about, I wonder what data they use to determine the price of that thing, or I wonder what data they use to figure out, this thing is going to be on sale for 2 weeks and we mark it down this percent, et cetera. So I'm kind of always thinking about things like that. Recommendation engines on Amazon. Why is this thing related to this? Like I bought this thing. Now they're recommending this thing that doesn't really relate to it. So I wonder how they found that association, et cetera. So one great way to change your mindset, and you have to intentionally want to do this to learn data in order to pick up a book about data. But if you are familiar with the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, he says something to the effect of working by yourself is for creativity, working with teams is for strategizing, reading books is for changing your mindset. And there's so many people that I know I've come across that they'll give a given piece of advice and they'll go, yeah, you just got to change your mindset. You can't just change your mindset. Okay. So my follow-up question every time is, how do you do that? And they're like, oh, you just have to change your mindset. So that was the most practical, actual advice on changing your mindset that I've ever come across. And I think it nails it. So books, there's plenty of data literacy books out there that will at least let you know what's possible. But really literally anything within the data realm, there's a book for it. If visualizations, that's usually what can draw people into data because it's significantly more interesting. Being able to look at like a pretty graph or infographic as opposed to looking at a spreadsheet. So you could look at books on data, storytelling with data is one, and I'll leverage some of those principles later and show you some of those, but there's plenty of them out there. Along with books, I don't have it in here, but podcasts are another good way to change your mindset. I know for like we have an Alexa or Amazon, whatever, speaker at our house, and I'll just, if I'm in the kitchen and I know I'm going to be cleaning the kitchen, I'll just say, hey, Alexa, play a data podcast, and whatever she puts on is what I listen to. There might be something I pull out of there, might not, but if you kind of surround yourself with these relative to like content. So if you're on whatever your favorite social media is, just search for data, start following some people. So you kind of surround yourself. Trainings are another, I'd say decent way of doing that. Some trainings are better than others, but again, most of the time, if I attend some kind of hour-long webinar, there might be a nugget or two that I'll pull out of there. And then most importantly is going to be tone at the top. And you could say that about, I don't know, it feels like everything is, well, you got to have tone at the top. You got to have buy-in at the top. Data is no different. And so if the CEO, or typically who I work with being the chief audit executive, is just kind of, flippant about it. And it's like, yeah, we're going to do data stuff. All right, bye. It's not going to catch on. But if they make a point to even, hit on this, set goals, data goals with everybody on the team, and really be the one that pushes, we are going to do this. Here are some metrics that we're going to adhere by, maybe even some kind of KPIs or something for everyone on the team, not just the data team. So you have to have that. Of everything in here, everything we're going to talk about, if you are a leader and you aren't the one 100% owning it, it's not going to work. I also like to talk about the data literacy floor. This is what I feel like everyone should be able to do, and it's super simple. So one is pivot tables in Excel. Everyone should know how to do that. unless you have some more advanced, if you're doing it in R or Python or Alteryx or something, that's fine. Obviously, if you're in those tools, you're probably pretty data literate anyway. If not, literally 20 minutes, watch 20 minutes worth of YouTube videos on pivot tables, grab some data that you already have, a payroll register, an AP file, whatever it is, any kind of transactional data, and just throw it into a pivot table, click on stuff, break it, hit Control Z, hit the undo button, try it again. It does not take very long to figure them out, I promise. And I'll show a little bit of pivot table functionality here shortly. Next would be X or vlookup. Or any kind of lookup functions. There's an index match also. It's a little bit more advanced than an X and vlookup, so I don't include that, but that's an option. And really what those do is if you have, two different tabs in Excel or two workbooks in Excel, and you need to pull data from one that's associated to another and another one, this is where you use an X or a vlookup. And then last thing is Google. And so what I always tell people is within data, it's aggregating data, which is going to be pivot tables. It's combining data sources, which in the Excel world is going to be X and vlookups. And then it's knowing the functions to use to like clean data. Or let's say you have two columns of data and you want to create one column, combining those or concatenating those. Then you would go to Google if you don't know how to do it. And you would say how to combine two columns in Excel. Somewhere in there on the first page is going to be the concat function. Somebody will show you how to use it, et cetera. So if you can aggregate data, i.e. pivot tables, combine data, i.e. X and vlookup or vlookup, and then use Google to figure out how to clean the data or understand what functions to use to get the data in the format that you want it to be. That should be the floor. Literally everyone should know how to do that. And if you're not familiar, again, I'm going to go back to pivot tables because I spent 6 hours. This was shortly after I graduated college. I'd spent 6 hours writing VBA code in Excel to make it do this thing that I wanted it to do. And after those 6 hours, like I was done. At some point, I came across pivot tables and went, oh, let me see if I can make it work for what I was just doing. And it took me 5 minutes compared to 6 hours. And that was because I didn't really know what I was doing in a pivot table. And then after I kind of got used to it and played around with it, I timed myself to see how fast I could do it. It took less than 60 seconds. Something that took me 6 hours to custom make took 60 seconds to do in a pivot table. They can save you a ton of time and give you some insight as well. So that to me is the floor. Everyone should know how to do that. It'll take you less than an hour to learn pivot table and vlookups or xlookups, and it will save you, depending on your job, it can save you literally hours a week. All right. So in-house webinars is going to be where like I, as the data team, develop some kind of tool, and then I would demo that tool to the rest of the team. And that was kind of the maybe best practice or what I thought was the best way to do it for a while. And then decided, or thinking back to my stats class from college, one of the few things that I remember is that you retain 95% of what you teach. And so with that, I said, hey, screw the data team teaching it. They already know it. They can build it. But then they need to hand it off to someone that's outside of the data team and go, you are going to be the one that presents this to the rest of the group. I promise you will put more effort into learning something, knowing that your peers are going to potentially peg you with questions about it that you need to be able to answer. Otherwise, you'll likely embarrass yourself. So that's always a don't let me pull this guy. Don't co-present the audit and the DA team. Just have the person, the auditor that's not on the data team, present it, force them to learn it. I'm gonna talk about visualizations here in a bit and show a little bit of a demo there. But that could be something to where it's like, I don't really want to be like the Excel person or the SQL person or the R, Python, whatever it is. I don't want to be that person. But the whole, visualization thing is really interesting. Designing visualizations that are appealing, that tell a story, etc. You could be like that person. And if you are that person, if there's some level of interest in doing that, then quit taking CPE courses or webinars on sampling, how to sample different in audit, or how to do maybe even ESG or something. Go take a design course on Udemy or Pluralsight or whatever it is. Go take those types of courses. You won't get the CPE for it, but you can make up for that with, there's obviously there's plenty of ways to kind of hack your way through 40 hours of CPE, but be that person. And then you can work with the data team and the other teams. It's a lot more creative. Like you get to be more creative, which I feel like we don't get a lot of chance to do that in audit unless you're in a data team or you're the data viz person. But it's really interesting to me anyway, like the way the brain works and why you want to use this color instead of this color. And you want to put this big blinking light thing in the top left-hand corner as opposed to the bottom right-hand corner. And so it is really interesting. And that might be something that you go, yep, I like the visualization thing. I'm going to go do that. So that's something you could definitely think about. And so anyway, work with the other teams when they present internally or externally, be the source for that to go, I'm going to go design this thing to make it look good and to tell a good story or the right story. Other thing being hit on the insights gain. So it's one thing to go, hey, this is the tool we built and look, it lets you see, we'll just call it sales across all of our store locations. Great. It doesn't really help a lot. But if you can go, hey, look, this is the thing that's built. We noticed this dip in sales through this visualization, this dashboard maybe. And so we dug into it and we found sales dip because of XYZ. These are the recommendations that were made. This is what was picked up or taken, and these are the results. Like being able to speak to the insights gained is going to really push the importance and the value that data analytics can add to your organization. Last thing is to just simply record those sessions and make them available. Some people will watch them, most won't, but it doesn't cost anything to do it. So you might as well, for those people that would be more interested in it, you can do that through, record a Zoom like I'm doing right now, post it on a shared drive or whatever wherever you share your files or however you share your files. Gamification is another good tactic to take. There's one organization that I talked to and their internal audit department, they used pivot tables, lookup functions, and then an if-then function or if functions in Excel. And so if you use like an X lookup, you got a point. If you use the if function, you got a point. If you use a pivot table, you get 2. So they set these rules and said, that's how we're going to do this. We'll make it a game. They called it the contest. And we'll do it for whatever, 3-4 months, tally the results at the end. And whoever has the most will get, they did things like a day off of work, a half day off of work, like something legit that you're going to actually try to do these things on. If it's like, hey, here's a $5 gift card to Starbucks. I don't even think you can buy anything for $5 at Starbucks. Maybe those like cake pops, which are delicious, but so maybe that would work. Cake pops for whoever has the most points, but it has to be a legit incentive. Like, we are adults. A $5 gift card to Starbucks is not an incentive. A day off, yeah, I would take that. $200 gift card to Amazon or a Visa card or something, I'd be a little bit more motivated to try something new with that. And so the other piece to that that I added was something like a Z-score. So like on a point scale, like if someone applied a Z-score, which is a combination of the way I'm going to show it, pivot tables, lookup functions, and another function in Excel, then you would get like 5 or 6 points or something like that. So it's just a way to, again, to gamify it, make it a little bit more interesting for folks and give them some incentive. All right, that's enough slide stuff. I've got one more, and then we're going to talk about how to actually do the Z-score calculation. So a Z-score is the statistical measurement of a score's relationship to the mean in a group of scores, which is represented by the formula down here. And if you are like my then 18-month-old son, you're probably like, I still don't know what you're talking about. Hardly anybody does. I don't know why they give these types of definitions. The only reason I did it is to set up a picture of my son that I could share with everyone. If you ever attend my sessions, I'm pretty sure there's a picture of him in there at some point. So just my way of doing that. So that's pretty impractical to be like, hey, this is what a Z-score is, go do it. And so I'll show you what a Z-score is and how to do it pretty easily. All right. So here's our file. This company has multiple organizations. Within each org, there's multiple departments. And so you can see like this org is, let me zoom in. 205001, they have facilities management 1. This is a different org, but they also have a facilities management 1. So huge company, a lot of organizations, a lot of the same departments within each organization. These orgs are probably gonna be like cost centers or something. And then account numbers are gonna be something like, let's say 7623, and your facilities management, maybe you rented a tractor or something like that. Like, it would be a thing maybe, or service or something to that effect. Maybe, oh, these are facilities. 7306 for information, or for IT might be a laptop or a server or something like that. Doesn't really matter. What we want to do with the Z-score is we want to find Z-score, if you boil it down, finds outliers in your data. So what we want to do here is say, the question we're curious about is, I wonder if within these given orgs, department, and account numbers, if someone has spent in a given account number significantly more, an outlier-ish amount more than the average amount spent on that by that department, by that org. So the first thing we have to do is create a key. I'm going to use the concat function here. So all it's going to do is concat or combine all three of these fields into one. And then we can drag that down. There are 6,133 records in this, and we're going to be doing vlookups. And so a lot of times what I'll do if I have to use a vlookup, it's pretty intensive, like resource intensive in Excel. So if you've ever got that spinning Excel, like please don't crash, please don't crash. What you can do, select the column, copy it. I'll show the mouse way to do it. Copy, paste, values. Copy, paste, values. Okay, and now you can see those formulas are gone. If you look up here, there's no formula anymore. And what that does, especially if you're doing a VLOOKUP, is because VLOOKUPs are resource intensive, it'll move faster and you likely won't have to worry about your machine blowing up. All right, so now that we had that, the only two things we need are the average invoice amount for each one of these account, department, and orgs, and then the standard deviation, again, for the account, department, and org. And since we've created this key, we can very simply plug in a pivot table. All right, this is where you can just kind of play around with it. But I'll show you for this one, the IA key. All right, so this is a unique list of all of those org, department, and account numbers on the row. And then for the values, you'll see that it automatically sums it for each one, so sum of total amount. If you come down here on the down arrow, field value settings, change it to average, it'll give you the average for each one of those. And you can see if you were looking at like this one, for example, and you're like, well, it didn't change. There's only one value in there, most likely. So it didn't change from when we summed it to an average, but you could see the rest of them change. All right, so we have the average. Next thing we need, standard deviations. So we just find standard deviations. Now we have the standard deviations. The reason these are zeros is because there is only one transaction for that account number, department, and org. So standard deviation is 0. So that's why these are 0 throughout here. All right. So now we have to take this data and pull it into our other tab. So this is where we'll show a VLOOKUP. Again, you can use XLOOKUP. The only reason I still use VLOOKUP in this demo is because there's a link in this workbook to me doing this again, because usually I do these live and they're not recorded. So I give people the opportunity to go back and watch it. And I did that video with a VLOOKUP 2 or 3 years ago. So I still use the VLOOKUP for demo purposes. All right, so VLOOKUP is going to say, hey, anywhere where you see this value that I just selected, wherever you see it in here, I want you to pull back what's in the second column, and then just always close it out with a 0. All right. And so we can drag this down. And now if we were to go in here and look for this value in our pivot table, this would be the corresponding average invoice amount. And again, I'm going to copy, paste values to get rid of the formulas. The other thing I'll do if you're documenting your work in Excel, what I'll do instead of doing all of them, replacing all of them, is I'll come down to the second one, and then I'll select all of those and copy paste values. That way the formula is only in one spot. You want to do this at the very end to make sure you don't mess it up. But all the formulas are, there's only one formula, as you can see. Formula is not up there, but you still have it in there for documentation purposes. So if someone wanted to detail review it and they wanted to run it themselves, they have the one formula in there, double click on it, and now it's in the rest of them if they want to check it. But since we are not submitting this for any kind of review, we'll get all of them. And then, excuse me, rinse and repeat for standard deviation. So all we're doing is using concat, pivot tables, and VLOOKUPs to do this. Say, okay, so now we want the third value rather than a second because the standard deviation is in the third column here. So we'll do a 3 and a 0, close it out, and drag it down. All right, now to actually calculate the z-score with these values, we just take the total amount, subtract it from the average amount, and divide it by, and then divide it by standard deviations. Since we're dividing by 0, Excel is going to go, hey, you can't do that. Totally fine. Don't really care about those. Again, because there's only one of these transactions for this account, department, invoice. I'm sorry, account, department, and org. There's not going to be an outlier. There's only one, so we don't really care anyway. Again, we'll copy, paste values. All right. Now, if you think about, I'll take you a little bit of stats stuff here. And if I pull this back up, and we'll go back to the pivot table. I'm sorry. We'll go back to Z-score. All right. So if you think back to stats and a normal distribution, then this represents, you have the one standard deviation here to one here that represents something like 68% of the population. 2 represents 90-something% of the population. And so anything with a Z-score greater than 2.5 is going to represent the top like 1.5% of the population, i.e. anything greater than 2.5 is going to be an outlier. So if you just fell asleep when I was talking about that, I fully understand. To summarize, all you have to know is any Z-score greater than 2.5 is considered an outlier. So what we can do is come in here, numbers greater than or equal to 2.5. We'll grab this one. Okay, so within this org, this department, this account number, the total amount for this transaction was $19,990. The average invoice amount for that is $326. And so if something is on average $326, it's pretty easy to go to that org department and say, hey, for this account number, we noticed it was like 20 grand. Usually it's $325, $326. Like, what's up with that? And there might be something there. There might not be anything there. They might have a perfectly good business reason for doing that. But if nothing else, especially on the audit side, they're, especially if you give them a little bit of like, hey, we calculated this Z-score to identify outliers and these are the results. It's probably something they've never seen before. And so they're going to go, oh, audit, you guys don't suck. You actually kind of add some value here. So if nothing else, even again, if it's like, yeah, that one was totally legitimate, you're going to understand the business more, which is uber important in being an internal audit and really any function within the business. Like, you really kind of need to know how the business works. So running something like a Z-score or any kind of analytics is going to help you understand the business. And usually what happens is the business, especially if you're in audit or you're like second or third line, is we go do like a kickoff meeting or something and understand the business a little bit. Then maybe we get some data and we look at it and confirm what we were told. We'll also see some things we're like, well, they didn't tell us it worked like this. So then you go back to the business and go, hey, we saw this in the data. And they go, oh yeah, we forget, like 0.5% of the time, Mark does this weird little thing because there's a system issue. And so that's why it shows up like that in the data. And you go, oh, okay. And now you understand the business a little bit more. So it's very cyclical in terms of understand the business, look at the data, confirm or find something new, go back to the business. I promise you those people that are over those business processes are going to appreciate it. I talk about this all the time from different perspectives or different use cases maybe. Is like analytics is clearly like a very technical thing. The end result, if nothing else, even if it's not insights or some kind of like huge change, it's a fantastic relationship builder. And I don't think I need to preach like the importance of relationships within a business, but it's really important. And so data can also be a really good way to build relationships within the organization. Okay. Machine's moving a little slow. All right, so especially when it comes to audit, and I'll kind of flip through this, accountability is going to be big. Not accountability is going to be big, especially within audit, but accountability is going to be big regardless of the profession. But these are specific to, for the most part, internal audit. As soon as you know you have an audit coming up, so maybe to make it broader, as soon as you know you have a project coming up, go to the data team. This is the project, or the audit, this is the scope, this is kind of what we're thinking, these are the risks, this is why it's on the plan, how can we work together to build something? After that, especially after you, again, in the audit world, you've identified the controls you want to look at, that's another good milestone, stopping point to go back to the data team and go, these are the controls we want to test. What do you guys think about, like, do you have access to data that would support testing this control, testing 100% of it, or anything else that you can kind of come up with based on the way we've scoped this down? So it's just largely a communication thing. And then the last thing relative to accountability is going to be goals. This is applicable to everyone, not just audit professionals. With someone that we've been working with now, their chief audit executive said, hey, everybody has to have, their typical, we'll call them goals in terms of like people or quality or volunteering or whatever it may be. But now you also have to have a data goal. So you have to have some kind of data goal. everybody on the team, and then the CAE holds them accountable. But I think something like that is really like the tone at the top situation we're talking about, where it's not, the CAE is not going, yeah, we're going to go do data stuff, go take a training. All right, we'll see you in 12 months when it's time to talk to the audit committee and you guys can tell me all the great and wonderful things that you've done. It's not that kind of approach. You can't take that kind of approach. It's very much like, we are digging into this. We're going to do it. It's going to suck. If I was the leader of the team, I would have told them that it's going to suck. It's going to make your brain hurt. You're not going to like it. Parts of it anyway. It's kind of like when you learn a foreign language, at least for me anyway. I took Spanish in high school and in college. And, the first couple weeks or months, pretty easy. Like, red is rojo. Sweet. I know Spanish. But then verb conjugations come up and you're like, oh, this is kind of weird. We don't, that's a little more painful, but you can slug your way through and memorize it. And then inevitably I would get to like prepositions. And that's when I was like, that's too much. That's when I would kind of bow out. So it's going to be similar. There's going to be things that you just go, yep, I get it. There's going to be a bit of a wall that you have to push past in order to make this actually work. All right. Last thing within the practical approaches, some kind of rotation program. So again, if you're in audit and they have a data team, grab an operational auditor, grab an IT auditor that might have some level of interest, plug them into the team. And that way they can learn day to day, and like they're just doing data. They're not doing other audit activities. The key thing there is however long you're going to do that. So if you're going to do like a 3-month rotation or a 6-month rotation, I would say even probably down to the week, have a plan for them. So it's not just, like, oh, we got this, person in our team now. Well, what are we going to have them do? We don't really have anything. So let's just go have them do this manual thing because nobody else wants to do it. Or clean up this Excel file by hand because nobody wants to do it. And it's an emergency or, whatever the case is. So you definitely need like a game plan for them, and kind of milestones as well. And the other thing is bring someone into the data analytics team from outside, maybe outside of audit, or even bringing in, if you have a data team that's outside of audit, like a data center of excellence, like pick one of them up and bring them in. They'll have probably 0 audit background, but probably 100% data background. So like bring that person in, maybe bring in a data engineer, or an analyst or somebody, and go, hey, help us. Like, you show us what to do, kind of thing. Within data, there's various things that you can be involved in, like engineering, analytics, or the analyzing piece, the engineering piece, architecture, ops, visualization, data or storytelling, etc. I like to show a little bit of data visualization just because I feel like, again, people kind of gravitate towards that. I'll be pretty quick as we go through this because it is available for recording. And again, let me note, a lot of these principles are based on a book called Storytelling with Data. Really, really interesting. Probably the most interesting about section, or like the forward, that I've ever seen in any book I've ever read. So if nothing else, check that out. It's a graphical way of showing the relationships. I think if I'm recalling correctly, the relationships of the people that the author wanted to thank. So usually it's like, oh, I want to thank my husband and my dog, or like whoever, for helping me get through this. The way she did it in a visual way that was, as soon as I saw it, I was like, this book's going to be amazing. Okay, so there's a methodology of sorts when developing a visualization. I'm going to use the audit and the audit committee chair here. So the first question we have to ask is who? Like, who are we making this for? The more granular you can get, the better it's going to be for that person that you're telling the story to. So in this example, it's the audit committee chair. How are we going to communicate what we want to communicate? I'm going to show 3 techniques, data visualizations that are super, super common. And so they're easy on the brain for people that are going to look at them. They don't have to, like, if you ever looked at on the news or in a newspaper or whatever, newspaper, online news, some kind of crazy kind of graph, and you might even like kind of feel dumb. Like, I don't know what this thing is trying to say. I've felt like that before. It wasn't until I really got into visualizations that I realized I'm not the dumb one for not understanding it. Whoever built it is the dumb one for making it so complicated. All right. So don't feel bad if you see something crazy, or even like maybe a waterfall graph, and you're like, I don't know what this is trying to say. It's the person who built it. It's their fault. It's not your fault. All right. So how are we going to communicate it? There's 3 that we're going to go to. What data do you have? If you're doing internal type reporting stuff, you're going to have the data, probably not in a nice format. It's going to be in your head. Things like, how many audits do we use analytics on? How many CPEs does each person have? Like, that's out there. We own it. We just probably don't have it. And then what do you want them to know / what do you want what do they want to know? So there's two ways to do this. If there's something that you want more budget, for example, you want to share the value of analytics so that you can get more resources. You want to design the visualization so that you basically get what you want. Other side of that is if someone comes to you and says, hey, I want this within a visualization or dashboard or whatever, then design it with them in mind. And then down here, this is just the most comprehensive list of things I've seen relative to data visualizations for an audit committee. So if you don't have any ideas of what you could do, here's some you could pick up. Probably the best piece of advice I would give here, rather than going, oh, I think the audit committee would like to see this, so we'll put this together. So let's just say CPE tracking. I think they would be interested in that. Let's put a visualization together for that. And then they see it and they go, yeah, we don't care about that. So take this list to the person that's going to care about it and go, here's everything we can give you. Pick one or two that you care about the most, and we'll build something for that. Those are two different ways to look at it. This is the before slide, as I call it. So if you took, this is data that I made up, and it shows the number of issues, or maybe we'll call it audit findings, within the Eastern division of some random company. And there's the number of open issues, closed, and past due issues. And if you throw this in Excel, like I just put this in Excel, and this is basically what Excel defaulted to. And Excel said, based on the data, this is what we think would be a good data visualization. For the most part, it's fine, I guess, but it really kind of sucks at the same time. When I get done, you'll understand why. So at the end, I'll bring up this data, and then I'll pull up Excel, and you can watch as I show you how to fix this based on some of the rules that we're going to talk through. Somebody asked me what visualization tools I use, Excel for data visualizations, but then there's just like Canva. There's plenty of even Photoshop, and then there's a few. I know how to do like one or two things in Photoshop, so I'll do it just in Photoshop and then bring it back. But there's plenty of tools that you can use for visualizations and infographics. All right, so the first technique, we'll call it, is simple text. So usually you want to do this if there are, if you're comparing two sets of data, we'll call it. So here's the example. We want to show the percent of audits using analytics. So 12% in 2019, 29% in 2020. This is a way to show it. I think what's a more effective way to show it, though, especially if this number is larger than 29, but it still works here, is to use what's called simple text, where we call out this big number here, or make it large. So somebody's flipping through their audit committee package. If they see this, or even I guess this, but if they see this compared to text, their eyes are gonna get drawn to this, and they're gonna actually read it, which is what we want. So this says the same thing. 29% of audits had a data analytics components in 2021 compared to just 12% in 2020. So that is simple text. Here are some rules to consider. Consider when you have one or two numbers to share. Tell the story using a BAN, B-A-N. That stands for big ass number. If you look up BAN, maybe you do it on your phone or something that's not your company's, maybe, depending on how comfortable you feel looking up the term big ass number. But you will see that it's an actual visualization term. The visualization community refers to these as bands. And so if you think about, like, if you looked up, like if you typed in sales dashboard into a search engine, you'll see what I'm talking about. The bands are like those big ass numbers that are at the top. Usually there might be anywhere between like 2 to 4, but it'll be like, revenue in terms of sales will be like the big number, 54 million in sales or whatever. But you can use those obviously in dashboards. And then what I was talking about with simple text to draw the eyes to that. That's why they're big. So they draw your attention to them. So another option is going to be tables. And this is the same data that we were looking at in that before slide, except instead of just being the East, it's each one of them. And what I wanted to show you here is how to actually create this color scheme. So this is that data. And what you can do, we're going to get rid of this. What we're going to do is, if you select it, I'll zoom in a little bit. Conditional formatting, color scales, and then you can pick, you can see, okay, so this is green, yellow, red. This is red, yellow, green. And so the difference being Excel's going, hey, if you're going to do this one, red is bad, right? So the 17 being red means it's the biggest one or the worst one. And here it's going, hey, maybe 17 is a good thing. You want the most of something, so we're going to make it green. Doesn't really matter for our purposes, but something to keep in mind as you like kind of flip through these. So we'll just pick this one. Then what we can do is we want to use our color scheme. Maybe it's like your company's color scheme. So let's say your company's colors are some shade of blue. So what we can do is we want to make this company colors. So we'll say, all right, blue for that shade of blue. This is the next shade lower. So we'll maybe pick this one. 6, 8, 7 all have similar shades. So we'll pick the next one from there. And then 1, 2, 4, and 3. We'll go the next one up, 1, 2, 3, somewhere around there. And then if we take this conditional formatting off, now it's applied the company colors. And you might even want to do something like, especially if 17 is where you want to draw the attention, we can make it slightly different by just changing it to white. And so if you're like flipping through a packet and you saw this, your eyes are probably going to go straight to these 17s, and then you're going to go 17, what's that open issue? Oh, there's 17 open issues in the South region. There's 17 past due issues in the East region. Again, if you're telling the story, that you can manipulate it to where the eyes of the person reading it or reviewing it or whatever are drawn to a certain place, because you don't want them going, finding some other maybe insight somewhere else. And I say insight kind of loosely there. You don't want them using their brain power to be looking at something that really doesn't matter. You want their attention to be drawn to the thing you want their attention to be drawn to. These are some examples of good and bad tables. If you're doing a session, giving a presentation to a group, like in a conference room, and you have a decent sized table, it'll make sense to alternate the color scheme here. So that you'll have people like trying to follow along with their fingers. It's easier to read, especially at a distance. So it's something to consider. But the reason I would consider this a bad table otherwise, because it's all about the background. It's not about the data. And so we want to bring the data forward and push everything else backwards. And so to clean this up, I would probably make everything a white background. I'd make all of the numerical values black. I would make the horizontal and the vertical lines around each value like a really light gray kind of thing. Again, push all the stuff back or get rid of it, depending on the scenario. Push it all back and make sure the numbers are what stand out, not the borders, not the bold headline or the bold column title. This is, I don't know. To me, this just, it doesn't look good. The color scheme does not look good. And so if you saw this one and went, hey, yeah, I think that looks pretty good, maybe take a visualization course or a design course, or maybe it's not for you, or maybe it is exactly for you and you're at the very beginning. And so that's why you were pleased with this one. And then the last one down here that we already showed. Again, it kind of depends on the intent of what you want them to see and where you want their eyes to go. Biggest thing here, though, is, I haven't mentioned it yet, with any visualization, have someone glance at it first and see where their eyes go. So work on it, give it to somebody else, your significant other, coworker, whatever, and then literally watch where their eyes go. And if you want the eyes to go to the top left and their eyes go to the bottom right, make note, fix it. You do not want the data to stand out more than the borders, like we mentioned a second ago. And then be careful when you're using a live presentation, because if you pull up a table as you're talking, your audience is going to pay less attention to you and what you're saying, and they're going to pay more attention to the table and trying to interpret it how their brains interpret it. So I always like to almost like set it up and go like, hey, we're about to look at this table. These are the insights from that. All right, so the next one's going to be bar graphs. This is the one that I use the most because most people have seen bar graphs since forever. And so it's easy to understand and communicate with them, similar to tables. We've all seen tables, but people see it, they get it. So here we have various certifications and the number of people on the team that have those certifications. Nothing fancy about this. If we take it, this is the way Excel kind of defaults this to. So it just puts this count up here as the title, which doesn't really tell you. I mean, it tells you what it is, but it's not a great way to do it. And then we can see how many CPAs we have, CIAs we have, et cetera. So if we know kind of in advance, almost like we know our audit team doesn't have enough IT competency, a high level of IT competency. We need to get more people thinking from an IT perspective or thinking about the risks relative to IT. Then this would be a great way to tell that story. And so some things you can do with bar graphs is the stuff that doesn't matter, that we don't want to draw attention to, you can gray it out. So what we want to highlight is these are the IT type certifications, the CISA, CISSP, and CISM. So draw attention to those. And then we can say, look, only 22% of the internal audit department holds IT certifications. The ask could be something like, hey, we need more budget so we can get the rest of our team upskilled in IT audit. So this is a use of bar graphs as well as kind of the simple text where we draw attention to the number within the text. Quick checklist on that. Use the text to tell a story. So instead of having count, I think we had something, instead of just having count up here, we're telling you, look, there's an IT competency gap in internal audit. Remove the grid lines. I'll share that with you. I'll show you how to do that in a second, but anything that doesn't, that's noise, like you can just delete it. Customize the title by asking what you want from presenting the data. Similar to what I was talking about with the count piece. Highlight what matters and gray out what doesn't. So we grayed out all the non-IT certifications and brought to light, I guess is a way to put it, the IT certifications so that your eyes get drawn there. Don't use decimals on the axis. There's no need to have 300.00. That tells you nothing. It adds nothing. It's just more to take in. So get rid of those. And then no vertical or diagonal text on the x-axis. And I'll show you what I mean by that. But I'll wait until I share that with you. Rules for color: use colors sparingly and contrast the grays and colors, the actual colors for highlighting. If you have to use company colors, play around with them, see what works, but know this, like in our example, we used, in the last one, we used a green color. So we'll just say the company's colors are green. Even if the company colors aren't, or they don't have black, gray, or white in them, you can still use those, to like push the thing back or draw attention, bring attention to the other colors. You're not going to get in trouble for using gray, black, or white, even though those aren't company colors. And that was the last note. The other thing that's not in here to consider is I think 1 in 8 people are colorblind. And so you might want to scale your colors in line with colorblind folks. And so that's a simple search on the internet. Data visualizations or visualizations for colorblind people, or the color scale for colorblind presentations or something like that. And it'll show you like the colors that you can use for them, which can also be, you would obviously apply to the rest of the audience. You wouldn't make a separate deck for just colorblind people, but all right. So this is how you actually do some of this stuff. I shared that one with you already. Here is a carve out. So in our other data up top, it was north, south, east, west. And I think maybe even IT. This is a subset of that where it's just the east broken out over quarters. And if you select this and just kind of throw it into a visual, this is what Excel says, hey, we think this looks good. But even then, like I know what I'm kind of looking for here, and it's kind of hard to tease out what the story is. So I'm going to delete this. We're going to use a different one. So if you've never done a graph in Excel, select all the data, insert. Then you can come over here to recommended charts and see what you feel like tells the story, or whichever one you like. This is what we had there to begin with. This is a map version. Obviously, we don't have any geographical data outside of the fact that it's east, but we don't even know what east what part of the world is east, so it doesn't matter. This kind of shows it, but it's also pretty terrible if you just look at it. So we're going to stick with a stacked column bar chart for this one. There's a couple of quick things that we can do to make this just a little better. All right. So we talked about removing grid lines. These aren't really necessary. All right. So we'll get rid of those. This border here, also unnecessary. And so all I did, click on it, then right click, outline, no outline to get rid of it. And really that's basically it. Like just click on things, right click on it, change it. If it doesn't do what you want it to do, hit the undo button or hit Control Z. It'll take care of it for you. One of the roles that I don't think we mentioned it specifically, but for chart titles, it's kind of best practice to move those to the top left. And then again, you want to make like a nice statement there about what it is that you want. The reason we put it in the top left, Tableau, I think it was Tableau, data visualization or dashboarding company. They did this study where they had retina scanners on all these cameras on people's laptops. And they would show a visualization, and then they would see where the eyes went. And then they would put it, they overlaid all those. They did, a couple hundred samples, and they would overlay each person. They would see based on that heat map where the eyes went. And they found that for the most part, all things being equal, we read visualizations from the top left over to the right, and then we kind of zigzag down to the bottom left and then over to the right, which is why typically you'll see like on a website, there's usually like a link back to the homepage on the top left. It's usually like company logo. You click on it, it takes you back to the homepage. Then across the top are service offerings or whatever whatever else it is, because that's where they want you to go. And then you kind of drag your eyes down through here and then back across. So that's why you want to put it in the top left. The other thing we could do is kind of best practice, move the legend up there with it. And I'm not going to change the title up here because I'm a pretty average typer and I don't want you to have to sit through that. Obviously a bit of a problem, especially if you're doing this straight from Excel and kind of modeling it after what I'm showing you right now. We don't want that 40 in there. So that's, again, something else. If we change the entire background of this legend, if we fill it in as white, it's going to get rid of that for us by doing that. So it's still there. It's just kind of hidden. All right. I know what the story is here. So, and you will too, like you'll know what story you want to tell if you're designing these from scratch. And so what I want to show is the number of past due issues that have increased over time. And so I want to call attention to these gray ones, but I don't want, as opposed to the blue or the orange. And so we want to make these blue and orange ones. We don't want them to stick out as much. So we can use different shades of gray if we want to. And now we can change this to a color that's going to attract the eye. So we'll stick with this crimson color here. All right, so now you can see it a little bit better, where we can see like this increase in past due issues over time relative to the open and closed issues. Again, I'm not going to go through all the sit here and show you, like, because there's things that I have to type out, but just to show you kind of the final product. So we're saying there's been an increase in past due issues due to loss of staff. Before the senior auditor left, there were only 5 past due issues. After the senior auditor left, there were 17 past due issues. So the story, that could be the story, and then your ask might be, you'd want to include this in the visualization also. The ask would be something like, hey, look, we've tried hiring a new senior for the past 2.5 whatever quarters. We're not finding anyone because you guys are asking us to be in the office 5 days a week, and you can see these issues are not being closed. So with that being said, can we please try to hire someone on and as a hybrid model or a full remote person, et cetera. Otherwise, we're just going to see this trend continue. Maybe that's the story you're trying to tell. So I was never actually a big fan of visualizations. Somebody would send me a Tableau workbook with these nice dashboards and everything, and I would open it. I would right click on it. I would say view data, detailed data, download it myself, and I would just play with it myself instead of whatever they wanted me to see. So I was never like a huge fan of data visualizations until, and this is from the Storytelling with Data book, this example. I saw this, and that's when I went, oh, that's why it's important. So this is kind of the before slide. You can think about it like that. Like this is probably the crappiest way you could look at this data, and then I'll show you the significantly better way. But you can see some of the rules that we talked about earlier being broken. Here are the decimals. Like the decimals add nothing here. Most of the time they aren't. Here we have the months that are all at a diagonal. Human beings don't read at a diagonal. So you want it to read from left to right. And so instead of writing these out fully, you can abbreviate them. So we'll show you that in a second. And then it's just kind of hard to pick up what's going on. This title, I mean, tells you enough, tells you the ticket trend, but a bit more would be useful. And so if you've been looking at this as I've been describing it and you're still like, I don't know what this is supposed to be telling me. Most people don't. I've done the session, I don't know, 8 times. And I've asked, like, what is the story here? And I go through the whole spiel that I just gave about not using decimals and not using vertical or vertical text. And I think in all those, there's only been 2 people that were like, oh yeah, this is what's going on. That's 2 out of, I don't know, more than 1,000. So pretty low success rate there. But if I show it to you after we've applied some of the rules that we went over, probably makes a little bit more sense. So it says, hey, please approve the hire of 2 full-time employees to backfill those who quit in the past year. Then we're saying this is the ticket volume over time. 2 employees quit in May. As you can see here, the line drawn for May. And now we can kind of see what's going on. So we have, these are tickets that have been processed. These are the tickets that have been received. Before the 2 employees quit in May, tickets would come in, tickets would get received. They got processed, received, processed, received, processed. 2 people leave. Now we're starting to receive more tickets than we can process. We have 202 received. We only processed 156. And so on, the trend continues. And so you can see we took out the decimals here, make it a lot cleaner, got rid of those grid lines to make this area here a lot cleaner, and abbreviated the months so they're no longer add a diagonal. So this is all around visualizations again, because I feel like it's an easy entry point for people relative to data literacy. If you are more interested in just data in general, these are some free tools that you can use. I'm going to call out a few. So KNIME, free tool, can do it all, can do everything, regardless of kind of where you are on the analytics maturity model. It can do it. Machine learning, or I guess from, combining two Excel files together to all the way up to machine learning, it can do it all. There's a great resource if you're interested. Download KNIME. Again, it's free. And then download, if you search for something called Excel to KNIME, Excel like this Excel to KNIME. It's a nice PDF they put together that goes, hey, I want to do a pivot table, but I'm going to do it in KNIME because I'm working in KNIME now. This resource will show you how to do a pivot table in KNIME. So it's a nice transition from Excel to a more powerful tool. Notepad++ is like a .txt file editor or a text editor, but on steroids. So I would recommend everyone download that, make that your default. It's free. All these are, hence the free tools. Two tools on here that have nothing to do with data, but I always recommend. One is LastPass. It's really a security tool. So it's you never have to come up with another password again. You just have to remember one password, and this tool will take care of the rest. Highly, highly recommend it. Of all the security folks that I talk to and I ask them, hey, what's something the average person can do to stay secure online? LastPass or some other password manager. LastPass is just the one I'm most familiar with, but not only is it making you more secure, but you never have to come up with another password again, which is such a pain to come up with. The other one's called Listery or Listery. It's kind of like a way to Google on your machine. So I have it installed on this one. If I hit Control twice, it pulls up a search bar. If I wanted to look up, like I need that data literacy file. So this is from another session where I did a data literacy thing. I can go find it instead of having to use the Windows functionality or whatever. Yeah, I think that's good for these. Power BI visualization tool from Microsoft. It's free. Excel, obviously. Access is, maybe good if you don't have access to like some kind of SQL environment. You can learn some SQL in there. Python and R, both free, both the most popular data tools in the world. They are also programming languages, so they're the most difficult for the average person who doesn't have a data background or programming background to pick up and use. And then just some other kind of fun ones in there that are fun to play with. If you are interested in learning how to do data analytics, you can apply these principles here. I'm not going to go into detail. I keep these around for a reference. It's based on this book, The First 20 Hours, How to Learn Anything Fast. The reason I show this is because like you will get to that wall, like I mentioned earlier, where you're just like, it's not easy anymore. By following this protocol, the goal is to give you enough knowledge of the thing you want to learn that you can actually execute in it and that you won't give up when you get to that hard part. I did not apply it to my Spanish learnings. Otherwise, maybe I would have stuck with it. Also didn't know about this when I was in college taking that class, but this is a good way to just like within, a week, you can upskill yourself enough to where you can actually do something with it. I will leave these in here for reference, but as an example of like a data literacy thing, this has nothing to do with like the job, but it was something that I was curious about. And so basically the concept comes from batching emails together. So instead of just like constantly being an email, like work for a little bit, email notification, let me take care of it. I was curious how often I did that relative to what it would be like if I just went, hey, from 8 to 8:30, I'll clear emails. And then I'll log back in from 12 to 12:30, clear emails. And I'll log in at 4 to 4:30, clear emails. And that way I can stay like more focused on the actual work that's in between the emails. And so to do that, I had to get all of my email data from Outlook. And so these are just steps to do that. And so I'm going to flip through these. If you're interested in doing a similar analysis, you can. And then I put it into an Excel workbook to show how to do it there. So this is the Excel version of that. This is what my email activity looked like to some degree. I think I had to fudge some of these numbers, but you can see like here between 10:45 and 2, like I was just email, work on something, another email, work on something, another email, and how difficult it would be to get really anything of any productivity done within this time frame. Whereas if I would have scheduled it similar here, look at all this time I would have had to actually do work. What would have been? This is the busy Wednesday. So all this time that I would have had. Anyway, again, as it relates to data literacy, like this is just something I was curious about, what it would look like, what my email looked like. And so I, it said, how do I get all my email data from Outlook? Figured out how to do that. I had to tie it into Access. And then pulled it down and had to figure out a way to visually look at it so that I could make some decisions based on that to come to some conclusions, et cetera. This had nothing to do, again, with anything work related necessarily, at least in terms of what I would consider chargeable type work or execution of an analysis, we'll say. But it's just something that interested me. So that's the overall point, is like, I had this question, and I had this question of how productive am I, or could I be, if I focus on my emails in batches, and then I use data to help me understand that. And then this is just a Tableau version. So I did it in Excel and said, hey, might as well try to do it in Tableau also. So this is what it looked like in Tableau. Similarly, again, overall, like if you want to learn more about data, apply it to the things that you care about, like your hobbies and things like that. I'm a football fan, American football, not soccer football. And so I was curious, is there, for the NFL draft, so they take players from college and they draft them onto their team. I was curious if there was like a player in college that was not deemed to be very good coming out of high school, but then ultimately got drafted in the NFL. And so that's what I wanted to see. Was there like a very low rated high school player that went through college, became a pro level player? And like this, again, nothing to do with work. I was just curious what that would look like. And so I went and found the data. This is the 2018 NFL draft early entrant. So this is what the data looked like where I found it, copied and pasted it and put it into this is Notepad++, so I can get into a text format, and then manipulated it in the tool that I use. And what I found, so here we have obviously the name of the player. This is their grade, how they were graded coming out of college. This is their star rank. So when you're in high school, you got a star ranking of 1 through 5. Not a whole lot of 5 stars. Those are the premier type players. Position they play, year, all this, the rest of this doesn't really matter. But anyway, so what I found was, coming out of high school, this guy, DJ Reed, was not even ranked. Like, he was, you could say, either so bad or had so few eyeballs on him from the scouts. He wasn't even ranked. Coming out of college, though, he was the number 8 overall player, according to this grading system anyway. And so that was all I wanted to know. I was just curious, was there somebody that nobody had ever heard of coming out of high school that is going to be like a first round draft pick? And there's actually 2 in this one, Leighton Vander, whatever. And so again, nothing to do with work. It was one of those probably like Friday afternoon or even a weekend thing where I was like, I wonder if anybody coming out of high school that wasn't ranked ever got drafted before. I wonder how many people there are like that. And I just went and found it. And I remember in doing this, I learned a new function in the tool because I had to do a certain thing. I didn't know how to do it. Learned a new function, and that's how I learned that thing. So all that to say, if you want to learn data stuff, of course you can apply it to your job. And that's great, but it's easier to learn something new if you're doing it for, let's just say, a hobby of yours or something that you enjoy. Could be difficult depending on what that hobby is. I think about a friend of mine who likes to make clay pottery, and I'm not exactly sure how we could do that off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's something that could be done there. So anyway, that is me. That is some practical advice on data literacy, along with some tools that you can use as far as a Z-score or how to actually fix your data visualization. And that is it. Thank you a ton for having me. This was, when Alex asked me to do this, it was a very easy yes. I would love to help. And it's something that I don't know, it's probably the most fulfilling webinar or session that I've ever done. So thank you very much for having me.